a few people and invite them. And while I am not excluding anyone necessarily from this conversation, it is a conversation about the 6-line progression. And so the folks that I'm inviting, I know are 6 lines. Okay. Am I hard to hear? So let me know, because I was kind of mumbling to myself, but if I'm hard to hear, then I want to maybe try and do something different to fix that. So please, 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 please let me know. Okay, wait, I just turned my volume all the way up, so it could have been me. So please let me know if that is improved. I need to know. All right. So I have my coffee and I have my water. Hello, beautiful Allison. So I have my coffee, I have my water. I've invited a lot of ladies that I know are 6-line people. And so I want to preface this with the 6-line experience really being important for everyone to understand. And so when I talk about 6-line, there are 4 profiles that have the 6-line. They are a 3-6, a 4-6, a 6-2, and a 6-3. So 4 different 6-line profiles. And your profile is the costume that you wear in this lifetime. That's the best analogy that I have for that, right? And so I am too. I'm excited to talk about this because it started this morning with a conversation with my oldest daughter, who was talking about, oh, like my 20s were trash and the 30s were great. My 30s are going to be great, or whatever, however the conversation started, right? That had to do with, what decade was the best for you? And as I kind of sat back in that question, I thought, for a 6-line, it doesn't exactly work that way. So I want to make sure that we understand that 2 6-line profiles are right angle crosses and 2 6-line profiles are left angle crosses. What the differences mean in that and how you're going to experience this energy. So the first thing you need to know is if you are a 6-2 or a 6-3, you are a left angle cross. So your personal cross is a left angle cross, or your hey Ngazi, right? So with that piece of information, I'm going to tell you that left angle crosses are a transpersonal destiny. And what that really means is we don't fulfill our purposes on our own. Our purposes are fulfilled through interacting with other people. Transpersonal profiles maintain a connection to past incarnations and often feel an unexplained familiarity with certain people and experiences. While the right angle creates karma, The left angle cleans up the karma that has been left. Okay? So if you are a 4-6 or a 3-6, you are a right angle, and that's a personal destiny, right? So the first 7 profiles in human design, most profiles are right angle crosses. It is a self-absorbed personal destiny focused on self-exploration and facing the personal challenges that they meet in life. They're not here to be absorbed into someone else's process. People whose lives intersect with theirs may spark new experiences but will not alter their movement through life. So I wanted to sort of set this up in that way because the left angle cross, or those of us with the 6 line in our conscious, number 1, feel that energy far more strongly, and number 2, it really is about how we're interacting with the people in our world. If you are a 3-6 or a 4-6, it is unconscious. So you're going to be less aware of that energy. Not that it isn't playing out for you. Hello, Anita. I'm really glad you're here. And if you saw my post earlier, I was having a conversation with Lee this morning, right? And she was like, what do you think the best decade of your life was? And I started, so now everything filters through the lens of human design, and I started kind of going, wait a minute, let's talk about, before my Saturn return, after my Saturn return, Chiron return is coming, and it just became an interesting perspective, so I decided to come live and let's talk about this 6 line process. So Anita, whom I adore, and if you guys don't know her and she is not a part of your universe, she probably should be, have a lot of really great conversations around this 6 line evolution. So, in this, your life is divided into 3 phases. I'm going to give you the ages, and then I'm going to give you the way that I translate this information. So from about 0 to 28, 29. So from the time you're born until your Saturn return, which your Saturn return can be calculated, is your first phase. And during this first phase of life, a 6 line really lives out the energy of a 3. Oh, okay, Alicia, that's fine. Well, what does that mean? Well, let me tell you. A 3 line is trial, error, mutation, adaptation, right? Life bumps into them in every way, or they bump into it and discover through trial and error how the material plane operates. So, that's the part to keep in mind about those first 30 years, right? Then you have your Saturn return. And your Saturn return is sort of the harbinger of going what they call on the roof. So on the roof for a 6 line lasts from about this age 29 to about the age 50, right? So there's a chunk of time where you're considered on the roof. Now, what on the roof means is you're no longer doing so much of that 3rd line bumping into life, life bumping into you kind of stuff. You're doing less of that and more experiencing and learning through observing the people around you. Which doesn't mean you're not having these interactions. It really just means you should be having less interactions and more learning vicariously. It is also considered a time for you in your 3-part process to internalize the lessons you learned in the first phase, work through any remaining feelings you have about that, and as you come out on the other side, which is your Chiron return, another date that can be calculated, you come off of the roof, and when a 6 line comes off of the roof, They should be living fully as themselves, fully in their strategy and authority, and engaging in life in a way that is meaningful for them, basically. And when you read this stuff in a book, it sounds really great. When you live this stuff in real life, it does not feel as nice as those words read. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So let's start with the fact that when we talk about these dates, we need to keep in mind that there's a waxing in and a waning out of this transitory period for each one of these things. In the way that our human body works and in the way that human design teaches it, each one of these phases lasts approximately 7 years. So you would take your Saturn return date, calculate 3.5 years before it and 3.5 years after it, and that period of time would be the time where you transitioned up to and then were fully on the roof. For your Chiron return, it's the same. You would take your Chiron return date, calculate 3.5 years before that to 3.5 years after that, and that would be the phase of your transition off of the roof, right? So it's a calculation that I can run. It's an astrological calculation. You could probably go to astro.com or anything like that to get that, like if you wanted it right now. But it is part of what I look at when I look at people's human design to see where they are in their processes. So, but basically, a Saturn return is around age 28, 29, generally speaking. And a Chiron return is around 49, 50. Give or take, and again, everyone's exact calculation will tell you exactly where that falls for you. But those are general guidelines, and you can get that date. But what I want to talk about is how this energy and how this process happens and what happens to you during this. So as my daughter was asking me that question, I was thinking, I was like, wow, I don't know that I could answer that, right? Because as I think about what was going on in my life, like in my 20s and then in my 30s and then in my 40s, and I look at the trajectory of my human design, when I lay that on top of it, I'm like, wait, I'm like, hey, girl, the 50s are about to be on and popping. That's what I can tell you. The 50s are where it's at. And that's kind of, the mindset that I've taken. And so I had at some point in the last few years described my life as feeling like, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with tarot, and I should have brought a deck over here to show you, but if you are not, there's a card, it's called the Tower card. So it's got a huge tower in the middle and it's on fire and it's crumbling and people are falling off of it, right? And I described my life as the Tower card, but literally on fire. Like not metaphorically, literally on fire. And as I've continued to do a deep dive into these lessons and this understanding of human design, I started looking at some major life events for me and their relationship to these phases. And so within a week of when my coming off of the roof phase started, right? So within a week of time of me beginning this transition of it's time for me to release all of these things from the past and release all of this stuff and really embody who I'm supposed to be and live fully as myself and all of that good stuff, I realized that my house fire, and so as I talk about literally on fire, I mean there was literally a fire in my home. It happened right when this next phase started based on human design. And I was like, well, if that isn't, the universe, God, source kind of going, hey, we need to let all this stuff from the past go. girl, it's time to move forward, I don't know what is. Okay, that's what I'm telling you. If your house catching on fire, forcing you to change damn near everything, isn't a big enough nudge from the universe, I don't know what is going to be. And I don't say it like to be funny. I say it because like that is literally exactly what happened to me. Good morning, my friend Leisure Webb. I am talking about those of us who have a 6 line in their human design. You don't, but that's okay because you can stick around. Because you are one of my right aligned variable people who help me see the forest for the trees, and you might catch something that I say that I might need to save for later that I'll miss. And that is, you are a huge asset in my life personally. And by the way, anyone who's on here, this is my friend Leisure Webb, and I love her very much. But I'm sort of talking about this understanding of the evolution of life and the roadmap that is laid out by human design, and how they've really, really kind of lined up. So I first learned about human design, I'm going to say at the very end of 2015 was like the first time I even heard of it. And I Googled a couple things and thought, oh, whatever. And then in 2016, it came back around. And I was like, well, wait, if I'm hearing about this again, maybe there's something good and maybe there's something I need to dig into. And so at that point is when I started digging into doing a really deep dive and taking classes and just taking in everything that I could about human design. And I found myself in a place in the very beginning, so back in 2016, that I had to work through, and we'll call it conditioning, right? But I had to work through a lot of my feelings about this unveiling of this roadmap, how a 6 line energy plays out. And so it's not a matter of what can you do or what can't you do, but understanding the energetic themes that are going along with you and things that you should take into consideration as you progress through the path. And I found myself really in a place of a ton of anger and resentment. Like, why am I just finding this out now? Wouldn't it have been better if I had known this much sooner? Wouldn't I have been able to plan and strategize and do things differently, had a better approach, had more tools to manage myself through these things, had I really understood how the evolution of this process was going to go for me? And Denise, I'm really, really glad that you are here. Because specifically, so for those of you who know Denise, hey, Nana is here. She is my stepmother. She is my father's wife. And she is also a 6'2", and she is fully off of the roof. And she doesn't even, I don't think, fully grasp the lessons that I learned through her and her process. So again, this is really to talk about how the 6 line energy kind of goes, what it does, how it does it, and what that means for people who are living through that process. Now, I have come up with some theories that really are strictly theories, and they may or may not be correct, but through lots of conversation with people, it's really at a place where I think, there's probably a little more to it being valid than not, right? When you are, hey Val, when you are in that first phase of trial and error, when you're in that first, let's say, at a minimum, 25 years of life, that first 25 years, you have got to know that everything you're doing is just about learning and growing and understanding the world around you. That you're not making mistakes, that you are simply engaged with life and you're figuring it out and it's all going to be okay. when you get to kind of that transitory phase and then you go on the roof and you really start to feel into who you are as a mature being, your perspective on a lot of things really, really shifts, right? So as you step into, I'm really becoming who I'm supposed to be, it begins to impact the way that you operate in the world at a whole other level. It really gives you a much more grounded, centered, and firm place to work from. But during this part of your life, from 30 to 50, essentially, what you really have to focus on, and I don't know that I can emphasize this enough, specifically if you are a 6-line being, is getting to that place where you accept, recognize, understand, make peace with, do a release ceremony, whatever you need to do to release the attachments that you have to who you were in your first 30 years, because you were not operating as the you that you need to be at age 50. And and I'm struggling like with a way to say it. So Anita, if you have like some better words, but through a lot of conversation and discovery and work with Anita, we came to this really interesting place one day in our conversation, and it had to do with the fact that I had just studied some raw material, and what I like about what I'm studying right now is a lot of it is his voice recorded. And so as you study that material, you get a completely different feel than when you're reading, because you get how he said what he said, and if there was feeling or meaning behind the words. And so it gives another layer, right, to that process. But really having this watershed moment of recognizing that the first 30 years of my life wasn't me. And so as we talked through that and worked through that, and I shared it in a post, we right. So we got to this place where we named those people before 30. Like, she has a different name than Alicia because she was a different person than who Alicia is. And that's not to say that it wasn't me and my body doing those things. It wasn't me experiencing those things. It was a way for me to come to terms with understanding that those experiences were for me, but they are not me. So I hope that makes sense. I really do. And it really has given me an inner knowing, an inner sense of peace, an inner sense of sitting in this, right? Like almost like I want to call it like a rebirth. Because again, I don't want it to be like, oh, I had children. I had one during that particular phase, and the second one was born during the second phase. But saying I entered into motherhood. I entered into a career. I entered into all of these things. Thank you, Anita. That's it. It's not about releasing the responsibility for the things, but recovering through understanding that we're on a learning process, we're on a growing process, and we really need to be kind and gentle with ourselves on that trajectory, right? So we have a way that we live that's really, really seated in a different perspective in that it used to be that, you went to school, you graduated, you got a job, you worked so many years, you retired. It was a process, right? It was this process of, I graduated, maybe I went to college, maybe I didn't. But let's kind of go back, let's say to the 50s, right? Just to make this simple. Graduated from high school, you went to some factory, some car manufacturing factory. I'm in the Motor City. You got a job, you bought a house, you got married, you raised your family, your kids graduated, you paid your house off, you retired, you lived on your retirement, right? There was this, and people were living, let's say at the most, to 70. But the flip side to that is we're on this path, this trajectory that's stretched far more. The bell curve has shifted. It's not this anymore, it's this, right? And so the path to getting to that mature place, the path to getting to the place where we're ready to step into full adulthood and ownership is a much longer path. And so, I think of like the movie Failure to Launch, which a comedy, right? And it talked about a young man who, never wanted to leave home. But I think we need to rethink, if we're living till, on average, 84, right? And the whole paradigm has shifted, when are we really ready and fully embodied to step into that level of responsibility? And herein lies the problem. Nothing around us regarding the expectations of doing that have changed. And so while I feel like the trajectory has changed, the expectations of the world around us haven't changed, right? And when we can get to a place where we can normalize that we're really adults, let's just say for the sake of our conversation, we're really adults at 30. We were not adults at 21. We were still young people trying to figure out how to navigate the world. That we can begin this process of healing ourselves and supporting the young people around us in a really meaningful way. And not just the 6-line young people, right? Because while they don't necessarily experience the energetic shifts that we do, they're still on that same trajectory at this point in time. And so if we stop looking at them as underachievers or lazy or people who don't want to get up and get out and do, and start nurturing in them for a little different path of maturity, I think we're going to begin to see a complete different set of results in these young people. Look at, I guess I'll put it this way. So I've got a youngster who's a senior in high school who, Lord willing, is going to be going to college in the fall. But I look at this as the extension of the learning growth high school process, right? And the particular path that she's chosen, what I like is I feel like the way to get there takes a little longer, but it gives her a little more of that maturity, that trajectory to maturity process, right? So in 4 years, you get that first degree, and then you've got to get your certification, and then you've got to get your international baccalaureate. And by the time you're really getting out there and getting started in the world, you're going to be closer to 30 than you are to 20. And I feel like there's a lot of benefit in that process. And instead of looking at it like, oh my goodness, you're getting a late start. No, she's probably going to live to 100. She's starting right on time. And when we can sort of deconstruct the stories that we believe around those things, that's going to help the whole thing. And I know I saw something back here. So I saw a couple of things that I want to jump into because I thought they were interesting. First of all, Sophia changed your name at 29, which seems like such a natural thing to do, right? At this point, it's part of the process. And Ngazi, I would say that there are some people from before 30 that are a significant part of my life, but very few. Very few. Right? And I even look at it this way. Because now I'm thinking about things, right? I have a cousin and she and I are extremely close. We refer to each other as Wonder Twins. But we really developed our relationship with one another as adults. We were around each other every once in a while we were growing up. We grew up in different states. But as adults in our 20s, and I'm pretty sure she's a 6th line also, as we're headed onto the roof, we connected and have become extremely close. Part of that process, right? Yeah, I would say that we will continue to resonate with our 6th line. Like, there's this whole thing, I think, that exists for that. And then to Denise, right? You say you're just becoming you at 65, but I've known you almost my entire life, right? I've known you since at least 1978, I think. I mean, I'd have to really think about it. Maybe it was 1980, whatever. I've known you most of my life. I would say that I've watched you, though, develop and evolve and grow into exactly like who you are right now. And I think as I look at that, right, and you're a 6th line, and so then I'll transition this into you're a 6th line who has been able to change and adapt and grow and recognize things and continue to reach out for becoming more and better and being prayerful and being, all of that plays into it. And I look at, and I say this, with no lack of, I think, understanding at this point, when a 6th line person comes off of the roof and they are not able to shed that first 30 years, and they hold on to beliefs and dogma and thoughts that really aren't serving their continued growth and development as a human, what you see is someone who has a failure to thrive. And going back, being able to figure out my mother's human design, and doing that after she was gone. And so it was a very surreal process through which it happened. And there are ways to do birth time reconciliations. And while her chart may not be exact today, as I have it, it is as close to exact as it needs to be for me to know that my mom was a 6'2". And so what happened was, having this conversation and wishing I could figure out her birth chart, my oldest daughter remembered seeing some papers that my uncle had done, and he was someone who could do astrological calculations in his head. He's a very interesting, genius man who just did some stuff, right? And she knew that not only was my mother a Capricorn, that my mother was an Aquarius rising, which put her birth time on her birth date within an hour-and-a-half window. And so based on literally every minute in that window, I know that she had to have been a 6'2". And I look at the trajectory of my mother's life after her coming off the roof time would have been, and I can in retrospect see a complete failure to thrive because of some beliefs about herself and about her role and her place in the world that she held on to so tightly that she could not step into who she was supposed to be later in life. And again, I say that not in a way to not love and honor who she was, but because I can, in retrospect, see how it played out for her and see what her struggles were and understand what she believed to be right and to be true that she held on to that didn't really serve her at the highest level. And with the energy of a 6 line and really needing to be able to release and let go of all of that and her inability to do so, how that did not serve her long term. And that's really kind of why this 6 line thing has been so important to me, and how I got to this place of really digging in and learning and researching and studying it, because the other piece is when you look at the evolution of humanity, right? Who are we as people, and where are we going, and what's important, and how do we evolve and grow, and all of that kind of thing. The conscious 6 lines, well, let me take that back. Yes, the conscious 6 lines, but the 6 lines that are generators and manifesting generators specifically are the catalyst for evolution of humanity, because that sacral energy is life force energy, and the 6 line carries the mutation of change and newness. I'm on a live. What'd you need? I will come see you in a few minutes. So, there's my cue that I need to go do some momming and respond to that from my daughter. But yeah, so this is, I think, what the next step for me would be with this conversation. I feel like I could host this, like if I set a time and a date, so let me know. Because I'm a manifesting generator. I'm going to inform. I'm going to throw something out there and you guys are going to respond. It's either going to feel good and feel right or it's not. But maybe doing a conversation like this on Zoom with us in a way that it can be interactive and we could all talk to each other. So let me know how you feel about that. Let me know what your thoughts are about that. I think that would be a wonderful next step to this piece of deconstructing, reconstructing, understanding. You too, my friend Leisha Webb. I love you. So there's actually, we can get into that like in another call, Ngazi. I would love to. So you have the 6 line process, right? You have all of that. It's just that your role as a projector is to direct and to guide rather than be the catalyst, right? And so it's a very specific, and I can get into that. I have that materials. I just feel like, you know, this conversation for those of us who have a 6 line, so 3-6, 4-6, 6-2, and 6-3, to have more conversation about what the steps in this path really mean and how they play out for us. because I have found that they are far more active than the words would belie that they are when you read about what this process means. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I love you too, Denise. And maybe we can do that within the next week. I can set up something. So just let me know in the comments if you think that that would be helpful to do this in a way, because I'm trying to watch comments and all that, where we could all speak during the process. I think that would be cool. I love you too, Miss Anita. I'll talk to you guys later.